when the narcissist realizes you're gone forever. And I want to spend a moment with the word forever before we go anywhere else, because forever is doing something very specific in this title that most conversations about narcissists and loss never quite get to. Forever is not just a duration, it is a quality of knowing. There is a significant difference in the narcissist's psychological experience of your absence between you being gone and you being gone forever, and that difference is not about time. It is about the specific moment when the narcissist system processes the distinction between a departure that is a negotiating position and a departure that is a conclusion, between a silence that is a statement and a silence that is a door that has genuinely, finally, irrevocably closed. Most narcissists in the early stages of no contact, in the weeks and sometimes months of the initial silence, are not processing your absence as forever. They are processing it as not yet resolved, not yet final. Not yet outside the range of the tools available to them for managing the distances that form between themselves and the people whose presence they need. The silence is being held, in the narcissist's psychological landscape, as a situation rather than a conclusion, as something that is still in progress, still responsive to the right deployment of the right tool at the right moment, still containing the possibility that the distance can be closed in the way that distances have always eventually been closable before. And the behaviors that the early no-contact period produces, the monitoring, the indirect reaching, the conspicuous new relationship designed to communicate your replaceability, the eventual more direct attempts at contact, all of these are the behaviors of someone who has not yet processed the forever, who is still operating on the assumption that the conclusion has not been reached. And then something happens. Something shifts. Something in the accumulation of evidence arrives at a threshold that the narcissist system cannot rationalize past. And the forever lands. And what happens in the narcissist psychology when the forever lands is the subject of this episode. And it is not what most people expect. Let's establish what has to happen for the forever to land, because it does not happen automatically. And it does not happen simply because time passes. Time passing is not the same as forever arriving for the narcissist's psychological experience of your absence. The narcissist can process months of no contact as not yet without ever arriving at forever, if the conditions that would make forever undeniable are not present. The forever lands when specific, cumulative, undeniable evidence accumulates to the point where the narcissist system can no longer successfully maintain the not yet framing. And there are several specific categories of evidence that are most consistently responsible for producing this accumulation. The first is the absence of indirect signals, because even in no contact, most people maintain some degree of indirect presence in the narcissist's awareness. Through mutual connections, through social media, even if blocked, through the shared world of people and places and contexts that overlap enough that the narcissist receives occasional information about you without direct contact being necessary. This indirect presence, even when it is entirely involuntary on your part, provides the narcissist system with confirmation that the situation is still open, that you are still there, still existing in the shared landscape, still technically reachable through the right combination of circumstances. When the indirect presence thins, when the mutual connections stop carrying information, when the shared contexts are no longer shared, when the narcissist reaches for the indirect signal and finds genuine absence, rather than the managed distance that no contact usually produces, the not yet framing loses one of its primary supports. And losing a support does not immediately collapse the framing. It destabilizes it. It introduces an uncertainty that was not there before. An uncertainty, for a psychology organized around control, is a specific and significant form of discomfort that demands resolution. The second category of evidence that accumulates toward the forever landing is the failure of every attempted contact to produce a response. Not the failure of a single attempt, which is easily incorporated into the not yet framing as a temporary setback requiring a different approach. The failure of multiple attempts across different channels, at different emotional registers, with different tools deployed with increasing precision toward the specific vulnerabilities that the relationship's history revealed about you. Each failed attempt is data. Each silence that meets a reaching is information about the distance between the narcissist's current position and the possibility of the former arrangement, and the data accumulates. The information compounds, until the pattern of failure is no longer explainable by the approach being wrong, or the timing being off, or the tool needing recalibration, until the only explanation left for the consistent, unbroken pattern of failed attempts is that the reaching is landing in a space where the decision has already been made, where the conclusion has already been reached, where the door that the reaching is directed at is not temporarily closed but is no longer a door in the sense that the narcissist needs it to be. This is the moment the forever begins its approach. Not its arrival yet, its approach. The narcissist system can feel something changing in the quality of the silence. Something that is different from the managed distance of no contact as a strategy and closer to the genuine, unmanageable distance of a conclusion that has no mechanism available for reversal. The third category of evidence, and the one that most consistently delivers the final threshold that tips the accumulation into the actual landing of the forever, is information about you that reaches the narcissist through whatever channels remain available and that communicates, directly or indirectly, that you are not in the same place you were when you left. That the person the narcissist is reaching toward is not the person the reaching was calibrated for. That the vulnerability that was mapped, the need that was identified, the specific frequency at which the manipulation was tuned. That all of it is being directed at a version of you that no longer exists in the form the narcissist encountered it. You have changed. You are further from the relationship than the distance of no contact alone would account for. You are building something, or you are different in some visible way, or you are simply existing with a quality of presence in your own life that communicates, even at a distance, that the door the narcissist has been reaching toward was not just closed, but was dismantled and replaced with something that serves a completely different function. Something that is entirely yours. Something that does not have a handle on the side the narcissist is standing on. This information, when it reaches the narcissist, does not arrive gently. It arrives as the final piece of evidence that tips the accumulation past the threshold, and the forever lands. And what happens in the narcissist's psychology, in the specific moment that it lands, is something that has almost no precedent in their interior experience, and that their psychological architecture was genuinely not designed to process. And the reaction it produces, hidden, because everything significant in the narcissist's interior life is hidden, but present and more complex than anything the simple narratives about this moment account for, is what we are here to talk about. And it is not what you think, which is exactly why it is going to surprise you. And that surprise is exactly where we are going next. What the hidden reaction actually consists of is not a single emotional experience arriving cleanly and producing a single behavioral response. It is a collision. A simultaneous arrival of several different psychological experiences that the narcissist system was not designed to hold at the same time, and that therefore produce a quality of interior chaos that is, for a psychology organized around the management and control of interior states, one of the most genuinely destabilizing things the narcissist has ever been asked to contain. The first component of the collision is the specific experience of irreversibility, and irreversibility, for the narcissist's psychology, is not a concept that has been frequently or comfortably encountered, because the narcissist's entire relational history has been characterized by a remarkable degree of reversibility, by the ability to undo endings, to re-access what was supposedly concluded, to deploy the right tool at the right moment and produce a reopening of what had apparently been closed. The narcissist's history has taught them, through repeated successful confirmation, that almost nothing in the relational landscape is truly irreversible if the right approach is found and applied with sufficient precision. You are the exception to that history, and the landing of the forever is the moment the exception registers as an exception, as something genuinely outside the range of what the available tools can address. And the experience of genuine irreversibility, for someone whose sense of control has been built on the premise that the right approach can always produce the desired outcome, is not simply disappointing. It is structurally disorienting. It challenges something foundational about the narcissist's understanding of how the world responds to them. And foundational challenges do not produce simple emotions. They produce the collision. The second component of the collision is something that arrives alongside the irreversibility, and that is even less comfortable and even less familiar. It is something the narcissist system does not have an adequate label for, because adequate labels require a degree of self-awareness that the narcissist's psychology is specifically organized to prevent. But from the outside, observed through the behavioral evidence that the hidden reaction eventually produces, it reads most accurately as something in the territory of genuine loss. Not the supply loss that previous endings produced, not the manageable gap in the regulatory system that the replacement strategy was always sufficient to address. Something older than that. Something that lives in the part of the narcissist's psychology that the construction was built to protect, the actual self, the one that was reached by the relationship in the windows when the construction stepped back, the one that experienced the specific quality of being known that the relationship provided, and that the forever is now removing permanently and without possibility of appeal. That self, in the moment the forever lands, experiences something that is the closest thing to genuine grief available to a psychology whose defenses against genuine grief are extraordinarily well developed. It does not experience it cleanly. It does not experience it in the way that a person with full access to their own interior life experiences grief, with the full force of it arriving and being felt and being moved through towards something that eventually resembles integration. It experiences it in fragments, in the gaps between the supply seeking, in the unguarded moments when the acceleration is insufficient to cover the quiet, in the specific quality of a Tuesday evening that has no particular reason to feel wrong and feels wrong with a specificity that the narcissist cannot trace to a source, because tracing it would require look in a direction that defenses have spent years preventing any sustained looking. But it is there, fragmentary, defended against, largely inaccessible to conscious processing, but genuinely there. And its presence, even in fragments, is more than the narcissist's previous experience of loss has prepared them for. The third component of the collision is the one that produces the most behaviorally visible hidden reaction, and it is the component that is most specifically surprising to the people who observe it either directly or through the reports of mutual connections. It is something that resembles, in its surface manifestations, anger. But it is not the anger of the earlier relationship, not the controlled, calibrated, purposefully deployed anger that serves specific functions in the dynamic between you. It is a different quality of anger entirely. Rawer, less purposeful, more specifically directed not at you, interestingly but inward, at the narcissist's own system, at the assessment that failed, at the map that was wrong, at the tools that did not work, at the specific confidence with which the original assumption of your manageability was held, and that has now been revealed as the foundational error that the entire subsequent dynamic was built on. This inward directed anger is not self-awareness. It is not the beginning of genuine accountability or the productive reckoning with one's own psychology that would be required for genuine change. It is closer to the anger of a craftsman whose tools have failed. Not a questioning of whether the work should have been undertaken, but a frustration with the inadequacy of the instruments. The narcissist is not angry at themselves for what they did to you. They are angry that what they did not produce the outcome that doing it was supposed to produce. The distinction is everything, and the behavioral manifestations of this anger, the sudden, sometimes public expressions of what reads as genuine emotion, the conversations with mutual connections that carry a quality of uncharacteristic rawness, the occasional reaching that arrives with a register that is different from the calibrated hoovering of the earlier no-contact period, and that has the texture of something that is not entirely under the control of the person producing it. All of these are the hidden reaction, becoming briefly visible. The collision finding outlets in the places where the management is temporarily insufficient to contain it. And here is the part that is most surprising, the part that the title promised, and that requires the most careful handling to describe honestly, without either overstating its significance or dismissing it as irrelevant to the question of what you should do with the knowledge that it is happening. Somewhere in the collision, in the specific intersection of irreversibility and genuine loss and the inward directed anger at the failed assessment, something surfaces in the narcissist psychology that is genuinely unexpected, not change, not the reckoning that genuine change would require. Something more preliminary than that and more fragile and more easily extinguished by the defenses that will reassert themselves the moment the collision's immediate intensity subsides. Something that functions, in the brief window of its appearance, like the beginning of an honest question, a question that the narcissist system has never previously generated with any genuine curiosity behind it. Not as a manipulation, not as a performance of self-reflection designed to produce a specific response in a specific person, but as an actual uncomfortable, genuinely unfamiliar inquiry directed at the narcissist's own psychology. The question is some version of this. What did I actually do? Not in the moral sense that genuine accountability would require, not with the full weight of responsibility for the impact of the relationship attached to it, but in the simpler, more immediate, more personally motivated sense of someone trying to understand why the outcome was not what the approach was supposed to produce. Why the map was wrong. Why the tools failed. The question is motivated by the wrong thing, by the desire to understand the failure rather than by genuine care about the cost of the failure to the person who paid it. But the question, however motivated, is real. And real questions, even motivated by the wrong thing, have a tendency to lead somewhere uncomfortable when they are followed honestly. And what they lead to, when the narcissist follows them, the very small number of narcissists who follow them past the point where the defenses reassert themselves and the question gets converted back into a more comfortable framing. is the beginning the only thing that was ever going to matter in the long arc of this story? Not the ending you hoped for. Not the recognition that would have made the relationship worth what it cost. But the beginning of the only process that could ever produce anything genuinely different. In the narcissist who is willing to go there. Which is not every narcissist. Which is not most narcissists. But which is for the ones who do, the hidden reaction's most significant and most rarely discussed gift. To themselves. Not to you. The gift to you was always something different. The gift to you was the forever. And the forever, as painful as it was to create, and as long as it took to arrive, was the only ending available that was entirely, completely, irrevocably yours. The forever, once it has landed on both sides. Once you have built it and the narcissist has finally processed it, as what it actually is rather than what the not yet framing allowed them to treat it as, does something to the psychological landscape between you that nothing else in the arc of this dynamic was capable of doing. It creates an asymmetry that has never existed before. Throughout the relationship, and through the earlier stages of the no-contact period, the psychological landscape between you was characterized by a specific kind of balance of information that consistently favored the narcissist. They knew things about you, your vulnerabilities, your needs, your specific history, the particular frequencies at which the manipulation was most effective. That you were only gradually, painfully, belatedly assembling into a coherent picture of what was actually happening. The knowledge was asymmetric, but in the wrong direction. The narcissist was operating from a more complete map of the territory than you were, which is why the dynamic consistently produced the outcomes it produced, and why each cycle felt, from your side, like a surprise even when it was, from the narcissist side, a fairly predictable deployment of a fairly reliable tool. The forever changes this. Not because you have suddenly acquired information you did not have before, though in many cases the clarity that no contact produces does result in a more complete understanding of the dynamic than anything available during it. The asymmetry changes because the narcissist's operational map, the one that was built on the assessment of you as manageable, as predictable, as someone whose responses could be anticipated and worked with, has been revealed as fundamentally inaccurate. And an inaccurate map, once revealed as inaccurate by the territory's failure to correspond to it, cannot be used with the same confidence as before. The narcissist is now navigating the psychological landscape between you with a map they know is wrong and without the ability to construct a reliable replacement. Because constructing a reliable replacement would require the kind of genuine perception of who you actually are that the narcissist's perceptive system was never calibrated for. They are, for perhaps the first time in any significant relationship, genuinely uncertain about the territory. And the genuine uncertainty is not comfortable, and it is entirely yours to have created. Now let's talk about what the person who created the forever, you, is supposed to do with the knowledge that the hidden reaction is happening. Because this is where the conversation has to become most honest and most direct. Because the temptation that the knowledge of the hidden reaction produces is one of the most psychologically understandable and most practically consequential temptations available in the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship. The temptation is to use the knowledge, to let it matter in the specific way that would make the forever feel more worth the cost of creating it, to interpret the hidden reaction as evidence that everything you gave was real, that everything you lost was significant, that the relationship cost what it cost because something genuine was being exchanged, even if the exchange was catastrophically one-sided. And the temptation is understandable because it is partly accurate. The hidden reaction is evidence of those things. The collision that the forever produces in the narcissist's psychology is, among other things, a confirmation that what you provided was real and specific and not successfully replaceable. That the map of you was wrong because you were more than the map. That the forever landed with the weight it landed with, because what was lost had genuine weight. All of that is confirmed by the hidden reaction. And none of it should change what you do with the forever. Because the confirmation that something real existed is not the same as the confirmation that something different is now possible. And the distinction between those two things is the entire distance between understanding the past accurately and being missiled by that understanding into a future that has not changed. The hidden reaction, for all its genuine complexity, for all the ways it reveals a more interior and more significant response to your departure than the surface performance of moving on suggested, the hidden reaction does not indicate change. It indicates impact. And impact and change are not the same thing, and have never been the same thing, and the confusion between them is one of the most reliable and most consistent mechanisms through which people return to narcissistic relationships that they had successfully left. The narcissist was impacted by your departure. The forever landing produced a collision in their psychology that was genuinely significant. The hidden question that the collision briefly generated was real. None of this means that the psychology that produced the relationship's dynamic has fundamentally altered. None of this means that the construction is less intact, the defense is less operational, the tools less available, the fundamental orientation toward other people as sources of supply less entrenched than it was before you left. The narcissist who has been impacted by the forever is the same narcissist who created the conditions that made the forever necessary. Impact does not require change to be genuine, and change, when it does occur in the narcissist's psychology, is not announced by the hidden reaction. It is announced by something considerably less dramatic and considerably more sustained, by behavioral evidence accumulated over time, in contexts where the old behavior would have been the easier choice, and the new behavior requires something that was not previously available. That evidence takes years to accumulate into anything reliable. It requires professional support of a quality and a duration that most narcissists who have the hidden reaction do not seek. It produces changes that are visible in every relationship, not selectively in the relationship with you. And it does not arrive on the timeline of the hidden reaction. It arrives, if it arrives at all, long after the collision has subsided and the defenses have reasserted themselves and the narcissist's surface level functioning has returned to something that looks, from the outside, like the person you knew before the forever landed. This is the part of the truth about the narcissist's hidden reaction that requires the most honesty to hold, because it asks you to do something that feels contradictory, to acknowledge that what happened in the narcissist's psychology when the forever landed was real and significant and more complex than the simple narratives account for, and simultaneously to not allow that acknowledgement to become a reason to soften the forever, to hold both things at the same time without letting the one undermine the other. The hidden reaction was real and the forever needs to stay. Not because the narcissist is irredeemable, not because the psychology cannot change, not because the person who reached you in the windows when the construction stepped back was entirely a fiction, but because the forever is not primarily about the narcissist. The forever was never primarily about the narcissist. It was about you, about the specific, non-negotiable requirement that the version of yourself you are building in the absence of the relationship has enough room, enough quiet, enough uncontested space to become fully what it is capable of becoming. And that becoming requires the forever to stay. Not as punishment, not as a statement about what the narcissist deserves, as a condition, as the specific condition under which the self that was compressed and managed and shaped by the dynamic of the relationship has the first genuine opportunity to expand into its full dimensions without doing influence on its shape. Because here is what the no contact period and the forever have been doing for you that this episode has not yet addressed directly, and that deserves to be addressed directly, because it is the most important thing happening in this entire story. While the narcissist has been moving through the hidden reaction, while the collision has been producing its fragmentary grief and its inward, directed anger and its brief, uncomfortable, genuine questions, while all of that has been happening on the narcissist side of the silence, something considerably more significant and considerably more lasting has been happening on yours. You have been returning to yourself, not dramatically, not in the cinematic way that transformation is usually depicted, in the quiet, daily, accumulating way that genuine return happens, through the slow reassertion of preferences that the relationship had gradually eroded, through the recovery of a quality of presence in your own experience that the dynamic had been consistently directing outward, through the development of a clarity about what happened and why and what you are and are not willing to carry forward, that the relationship's active management of your perception had made genuinely inaccessible. You have been returning to yourself. And the self you are returning to is not the same as the self you were before the relationship. It is not diminished by what the relationship cost it. It is, in the specific and counterintuitive way that difficult experiences produce depth when they are processed honestly, larger than it was before. More specifically yours, more clearly bounded, more accurately aware of its own value and its own requirements and its own non-negotiable conditions for genuine connection. More capable of the specific kind of discernment that recognizes the difference between someone who is impacted by your departure and someone who has done the work that your presence deserves. And that discernment, the ability to hold the hidden reaction with understanding, and without letting the understanding become a return, is not something you could have developed inside the relationship. It required the forever. It required the specific quality of silence that the forever creates, in which the narcissist's influence on your perception is finally, completely, without ongoing interference, removed. And in that silence, in the fullness of it, you have been developing the most important thing available to someone coming out of a narcissistic relationship. Not the ability to understand the narcissist. Not the ability to feel appropriate compassion for the hidden reaction without being moved by it in the direction of the relationship. Not the strategies for maintaining no contact or the frameworks for understanding why the dynamic produced what it produced. All of those things matter, and all of them are part of what the silence produces. But the most important thing is simpler and more fundamental than any of them. It is the experience of your own company, the specific daily, gradually deepening experience of being with yourself without the relationship's ongoing requirement that you organize yourself around someone else's psychological needs and someone else's management of your perception and operational map of who you are and what you are for. The experience of being, in the fullest and most uninterrupted sense available, entirely yourself. And that experience, accumulated over the weeks and months of the forever, is not preparation for the next relationship. It is not a phase you move through on the way to something else. It is, in itself, the thing that the relationship cost you and that the forever is returning. It is the answer to every question the narcissist's hidden reaction raises about whether the connection was real and whether the loss was significant and whether the cost was worth the creating of the forever. The answer to all of those questions is the same. Yes. And also look what the forever gave you back. Look what is here now that was not here before. Look at the size of the space that the forever created and what is growing in it that could not grow before. That is the real hidden reaction. Not the narcissist's collision, as genuine and as complex as it was.